Greetings, my friends. I'm Paper Ninja, and I'm here to talk about a Toho fan game known as Gensou Shoujo Taisen, or what is commonly known in English, Fantasy Maiden Wars. To give a brief summary, Fantasy Maiden Wars is a fan-made game made primarily by Sanbando and their team to create a game that takes several inspirations from the mech crossover series, Super Robot Wars. Honestly, there's a ton of other people who could tell you what Super Robot Wars is better than I can. If you wanted to ask me, in the most basic terms possible, without even scratching the surface, Super Robot Wars would be an amalgamation of pretty much every mech anime series that you can think of, smashed together into an SRPG video game series. If it had any form of a mech, robot, or any robot-esque figure turning big, there's a pretty good chance that it's appeared in Super Robot Wars sooner or later. Series like Gurren Lagann, Code Geass, Macross, Gundam, you name it, and it's probably been in Super Robot Wars. Even when describing it to some of my own friends, I usually like to describe it as an overhead strategy game, kind of like Fire Emblem, with mech anime and different mechanics. And that's just a super basic version I give, as there are several other people who can already explain much better than I can on what Super Robot Wars exactly is. Normally, things like this would be a licensing nightmare, so fans are generally forced to make their own headcanons as to what would happen if one series crosses with another. Honestly, something like this is an absolute miracle, with the stars aligning to create a series like this and be released as a title. Furthermore, the Western audience has historically struggled getting official English ports, as these games were primarily Japanese due to external issues. For some, there are English translations, making it more accessible if you knew where to look around. However, for most of us non-speaking Japanese folks, these were games that stayed at the forefront of minds of fans of mech anime, but cried as we would likely only ever hope to understand minimally what was being said or going on. Regardless, I won't go much further on this topic. For the purpose of this video, however, we're going to be talking about the Toho and Super Robot Wars crossover, Gensou Shoujo Taisen, or also known as Fantasy Maiden Wars, as well as basic mechanics that separates it from its Super Robot Wars counterpart. Like I said, Fantasy Maiden Wars is a fan-made game made to emulate the gameplay from Super Robot Wars. The game was first released in around 2010, with 3 additional games after the first. A compilation was eventually released called Fantasy Maiden Wars Complete Box, featuring some major quality of life changes to the UI, the mechanics, and even additional routes you can play. The older games are still around, with 3 of them being English translated already, and the 4th being partially translated. The recent version, Complete Box, has no complete translation as shown here, though most of the original route is externally translated already due to the dialogue being uploaded on another site. The game has been notoriously difficult to translate internally, and Complete Box is unlikely to even get a full translation until 2025 and beyond. For the purposes of this video, I'll be talking about FMW Complete Box on PC, since that's the most recent iteration of the game, and the one I recommend most people playing, despite there being no in-game translations, as most everything else vital is externally translated. There's also a Switch version, which has some minor differences from the PC, but plays primarily the same. If you're completely new to Super Robot Wars in general though, I'll give a brief overview of what you can expect in Fantasy Maiden Wars. You play through a map that has a victory, defeat, and a bonus condition. You win when you achieve the objective in most cases, or you lose when a defeat condition occurs. The bonus objective is there just to kind of flex your skills a bit, to see if you can do it, or even teach some new basic mechanics that are going to be new to the player. Though there is some incentive to do these, as you are given minor rewards for completing it. It's by no means mandatory, but you can go for it if you like. Much like other strategy type games, you deploy and use several characters on a map, and using their skills, attacks, and your own mind, you complete the objective as best as you can. Each character that you can use is generally different in what they can do. One character you use in one map or chapter, you can choose not to use in another map. Next, I'll be going to major mechanical changes in Super Robot Wars, starting with danmaku. You can see by the orange tiles that these are different from regular other ground tiles. By hovering your cursor over it, you can see that entering these tiles incurs penalties for entering with the character. On the left is defense, on the middle is evasion, and on the right is movement. These tiles come from these enemies with the Japanese symbol, such as this one here. To avoid this, all characters come with the ability to alternate their type of movement, and swap between unfocused mode and a focus mode, indicated by this dot in the middle of a character. Movement while unfocused into the orange danmaku tiles causes a loss in movement, incurring penalties shown earlier while inside the danmaku tiles. However, focus move incurs no penalties while moving into a danmaku field at the cost of lower movement. Additionally, during combat, dodging an attack is different in both unfocus mode and focus mode. In respect to the Touhou official bullet hell games, Fantasy Maiden Wars implements grazing, a mechanic that is generally only applicable while focused. During combat, dodging an attack normally results in completely dodging an attack, causing 0 damage, and is typically what occurs in unfocused mode. The percentage displayed is as simple as it gets, and failing to dodge means taking the full damage. However, grazing an attack instead means your character not completely dodging the attack, and while technically evading, was hit by whatever percentage was displayed during the combat screen. Grazing can only occur while in focus mode, so there is a trade-off to entering focus mode in order to avoid danmaku penalties. If the combat screen displays a 60% chance of the enemy hitting you, then you have a 40% chance of dodging the attack, and if your character successfully dodges, then you would take 60% of the damage of what would have been dealt to you had you been hit instead. This requires more thinking about combat and movement, as grazing can still cause character deaths if you're not careful about someone's health. The next major mechanic that's primarily from Fantasy Maiden Wars is the titular spellcard system, inspired from the Touhou series. Its functionality in Fantasy Maiden Wars is to diversify bosses, giving them unique challenges not typically found from bosses in the Super Robot Wars series. A boss of the spellcards is signified by hovering over them and seeing this blue rhombus icon here. Each rhombus represents a new health bar and spellcard that is activated when the current health bar is reduced to 0. When a spellcard is triggered by depleting the previous health bar, the boss will use a new health bar and trigger new danmaku, mechanics, and effects. On the bottom left, upon hovering a boss's spellcard danmaku, you can see what the danmaku and the spellcard does for both the player and the boss. In this case, the boss is currently reducing all player accuracy by 30%. Grazing in this scenario will not cancel out the spellcard's effects, but will cancel out the generic danmaku penalties on the bottom left. If the current boss's health is depleted this time, they will either trigger a new spellcard if they have any left, or they will be defeated instead. On the upper right is a time limit, indicating the amount of turns you have to take out the boss's health before the spellcard ends. The game uses full turns for spellcards, meaning here, you have 4 turns, including the enemy phase, before the spellcard ends. There's no penalty for not being able to take out the boss's spellcard, however, you are given several rewards for doing so, including money, pilot points, and experience for characters who dealt the final blow. This sums up the major mechanical differences between Super Robot Wars and Fantasy Maiden Wars on the gameplay basis. I haven't discussed anything about the spirit commands, types of characters, or even the intermission screen, as those are generally familiar concepts with Super Robot War players. Fantasy Maiden Wars is a lengthy game, easily clocking in at 40 to 100 hours on a first playthrough. Regardless, I think and hope other players, Super Robot War and Touhou fans alike, have the chance to experience this phenomenal game, as its deceptively good story and solid gameplay carry it through. While the Japanese text may seem intimidating, I sincerely hope players of both fandoms give this game a try. There are plenty of ways to help circumvent it, such as external translations for the dialogue and story, or partial English menu translations to help understand the skills and spirits. I hope I was able to provide a concise video on what the differences were between these two games. Thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.